The reaction to Charlie Kirk's murder proves America is closer than ever to its next civil war. A question that has been going viral. Not so much a question for many people, but a statement. People on the left and the right are screaming civil war. Many in the middle are asking, is this a civil war? And of course, you're all saying, here comes Tim Pool once again to talk about civil war. Maybe the reality is just that my predictions are correct. Not completely, not 100%. They're all rather vague to a certain degree. But I have been saying for some time, based on the news, the path we are leading to mathematically leads us towards civil war. I have some ideas about what that may or may not look like. I don't believe it's a guarantee. I don't think we are actually in a civil war right now. We are in a period known as civil strife. That's how the academics describe it. But we have numerous articles. So allow me not to waste your time that I can show you. Here's The Independent. The New York Times. Civil war mentions surge online after Kirk's assassination. Here's Wired. War is here. The far-right responds to Charlie Kirk shooting with calls for violence. The LA Times. From Charlie Kirk to Supreme Court backlash, Civil War historians see modern parallels. Alternate. Desensitization to political violence takes America back to the pre-Civil War era. We have this from the Times of Israel. Two nations or civil war, America must choose. The best title, in my opinion, from The Atlantic, Strawberries in Winter. Most Americans do not want civil war. Anyone who is declaring it should stop, which is actually a really fascinating headline in that it is inadvertently a direct quote from me from like 7 or 8 years ago, in which I pointed out that when civil war happens, you will not be able to get off-season, out-of-season fruits. No more strawberries in winter. Then we have this from Reuters. Nation on edge. Experts warn of vicious spiral in political violence after Kirk killing. Poly market, albeit the market is slow, not the most prominent. U.S. Civil War in 2025 with only a 3% chance. I bring that up just because many people are upset that they're asking the question. And so here we are. Will there be a civil war? Are we in a civil war? Stephen Marsh is the expert. I defer to him. It's more of the liberal persuasion. And he's written a book called The Next Civil War. And I've interviewed him. I think we've had him on 3 times. Would love to have him on again. And he makes a lot of very good points. And he and I see a lot of similar things, though I'm not tracking this the same way he does. And I think he has biases based in the lies from the corporate press. In his view, the threat of civil war comes largely from the right. I'll break down why I think that is largely incorrect. Not completely incorrect. There's always a little bit of truth, but an overestimation. The real threat, in my opinion, comes from the left. And the reason why is that the fringes of the right wing that engage in violence are renounced, are rejected by the right. The person who killed Charlie Kirk, based on all available evidence, that which has been presented by the FBI, the DOJ, as well as even confirmed by Axios with 6 sources. The shooter was motivated by trans ideology, likely because of a roommate or lover that this man lived with that was trans. There's evidence that numerous trans individuals had foreknowledge of the shooting, saying specific dates and Charlie Kirk, something was going to happen to him, things of that nature. Now, we don't know exactly for sure, and the investigation is still underway. But right now, all evidence points to defense of transgender ideology against Charlie Kirk, who had just answered a question about transgender mass shooters when he was shot and killed. Transgender ideology is not fringe far left. It is mainstream Democrat ideology. That is, you will see run-of-the-mill moderate Democrats espousing this ideology. You will see the most moderate of liberals making claims in line with this ideology. The violence that we see from the far left is not being denounced. They are celebrating it, and now they are deflecting, putting up lies, claiming that it was Nick Fuentes who, in fact, radicalized a right-wing groyper into killing a conservative, which makes literally no sense. Now, by all means, the liberals are going to tell each other that clearly the right wing is just so dangerous that they kill each other. They're going to say that I'm lying. They're going to say I'm wrong. I've brought some receipts, but this video is not so much talk about who's responsible, but more so what's happening and approach it from a bit of an analytical point of view. I'm sure all of you have the question, is this a civil war? Hence, it is trending. It is trending on X and on Google. And all of these articles have been written. I want to read for you a bit from this, from The Independent. The reaction to Charlie Kirk's murder proves America is closer than ever to its next civil war. I won't read the full thing, but there are some points Stephen Marsh makes that I want to read with you. He says, we'll start from the beginning. It took days for the suspect in the shooting of Charlie Kirk to be named, but the identity of the killer and his reasons for killing hardly matter in the wider picture. The fallout is utterly predictable. Divided America will divide further. Political violence already surging will surge further. America will continue further down the road to the perdition of the republic. When I published The Next Civil War in 2022, the experts on civil war and assassination I spoke with were clear with me. What is uniquely dangerous about the current moment the United States faces is not the political violence in itself, but the collective reaction to it. America is now, and it has always been, an outlier for political violence. Far more political figures have been murdered in American history than in the history of any other democracy. He says it was understood that the violence perpetrated by whoever was a disaster for the body politic as a whole. Politics exists, after all, to save us from violence as a means of resolving disputes. Agreed. The sense of collective mourning no longer applies. The reaction to Kirk's death instantaneously split American discourse. Here was a 31-year-old man murdered in broad daylight in front of his wife and children before a crowd of thousands at Utah Valley University. Americans could not agree that that was unacceptable. I don't want to promote or identify people on social media who crowed about the death, like their team had just won a football game, but on my feeds at least, it was not limited to a few cranks or extremists. What about the children killed in Colorado? It was a perfectly common sentiment. Anyone on the left who imagines the political assassination of their opponents is going to lead to more stability or a better America is seriously, seriously deluded. The right in America has responded with blood-curdling threats of retribution. Donald Trump blamed the radical left for the shooting and promised a crackdown, saying its rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we are seeing in our country today. In his Oval Office address, he then omitted violence against Democrats from a list of politically motivated attacks, incidents of what he termed radical left political violence. I don't disagree with Stephen Marsh. It doesn't matter what you think is true or not. The left lives in their world. The right lives in their world. And where Stephen Marsh and I had disagreed when he said the right is more violent and more dangerous. Bro, I don't live under armed guard security because right-wingers are threatening me. Now, I know the response is, but you're on the right, Tim, whatever that means. Even though I consider myself to be moderately liberal, I even use preferred pronouns. Can you believe it? It doesn't matter. I am not aligned with the far left transgender ideology, even when I'm saying I'm willing to use their preferred pronouns. It's not enough. But then they say Groypers killed Charlie Kirk. Okay, so which is it? I've never been threatened by a Groyper. I've been asked for debates. Why would they go after Charlie Kirk? Why would a Groyper live with a trans person if that's all that was happening? The truth is this. It doesn't matter what you think is true. It doesn't matter what even actually is true at the end of the day, because the left will believe what they deem to be true and the right will believe what they deem to be true, and that is enough for each side to declare war on each other. Already we're seeing people severing ties. I have friends that have celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk, and I do not want to ever interact with them again. Charlie was my friend. I'm not saying that I was best friends with the guy or we were really good friends or anything like that. I'm saying I just texted him a week ago. It's an absolutely insane feeling to me. He had helped our crew. He had been good to us. He had moved mountains to have us be a part of his events. He had come on the show numerous times. I have just behind me a drawing made by Jessica here at Timcast. Which way am I pointing? There we go. He had autographed it for us. We hung it on our wall, along with many others. And we have a signed autographed poster from him. He was a good man. And he was good to us. And he was good to many people. I have friends celebrating his death. They know that I was friends with the guy. What am I supposed to do? How do I sit down with the person and look me in the eyes and say that Charlie deserved it? So I get it. I'm clearly on one side of this. But Stephen is correct. He says journalists are now targets. Let's be real. Charlie Kirk was not a journalist. He was an activist. He had a podcast. He spoke about what he believed in. He did not make laws. He was a civilian advocate who was killed while giving statements, giving answers, taking questions. They now show images of Charlie Kirk that I can't show, cartoons and T-shirts. It says, debate this, and blood is spraying from his neck. Tell me how a nation recovers from this bifurcation. Let's read more. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. The effect of violence on journalism in the United States will be the same as the effect on violence on any institution. It will corrode the capacity to function slowly but surely. Already the fact that Trump is having all American flags lowered to half-mast in Kirk's memory is a subtle but toxic gesture. He was their guy, so he's therefore a national hero. American journalists from now on will be functionaries of a political order. They'll be subject to the hyperpartisanship that has afflicted all other aspects of American life. And you see what he said? It was a subtle but toxic gesture to lower the flags for Charlie Kirk. We live in two different worlds, even Stephen Marsh. Charlie Kirk embodied the democracy Democrats claim to want. He only spoke. He pushed nonviolence, debate. He offered you a chance to debate him anywhere, anytime. That's what it's supposed to be. And in response, they said, no, he was a bigot who spread hate. And they argue he deserved to die. Now, I'm not speaking of Stephen Marsh, but he called it toxic to honor Charlie Kirk. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, Trump came out and he said, wow, she was an amazing woman. Whether you disagree or disagree, she led an amazing life. When Charlie dies, they say he was toxic, and it's toxic to support him. We live in two completely different worlds. He says, I remember when I was in the middle of writing the next Civil War, the January 6th insurrection happened. He calls it an insurrection. We live in two different worlds. And a friend of mine called me to commiserate over what he assumed was the death of my book. He really believed that the storming of the Capitol would be a wake-up call, and that reasonable people would get together to put an end to political violence overwhelming America. He was wrong. The American people are developing a taste for the dehumanization of the other. The right has so far been responsible for almost all of the political violence in the United States, but the left is fast catching up. Luigi Mangione, who shot a man for being the CEO of a health insurance company, has shrines in New York. Now, here's where I would like to debunk. You see, Stephen Marsh probably would admit this to be true, actually. The problem we have with claiming the right is responsible for the violence is that Stephen Marsh told me he's referring to sovereign citizen types and anti-government or white supremacist types who actually have no place in mainstream modern American politics. They exist on the fringes of what is only tangentially described as the right for some reason. I don't know why racial identitarians are right-wing when Charlie Kirk said he wanted a race-neutral country and the favorite Supreme Court justice of everyone on the right is Clarence Thomas. But you see what they do. If a racist kills someone, he's right-wing, and then Charlie Kirk, who is opposed to racism, is of the same political category. Meanwhile, on the left, when George Floyd dies, every liberal, every Democrat, and every leftist is aligned on the issue of George Floyd, and they riot, and even Kamala Harris raises money. There is a strong difference. And so therein lies the problem. So the right says, no, we're not. We don't engage in violence. And the left looks over and points at some psychotic racist and says, you're racist and so is he, therefore all of you. But I'll give you the real facts. The shooter in the Charlie Kirk case, right now, according to the data, was transgender aligned ideologically. That is not the right. That is mainstream Democrat. And how are the Democrats responding? While many cheer, as he pointed out, for his death, they're also just lying about it. I believe I have the tweet here. Politics Girl, as I've shown throughout the day, made a fake video. Let's play it.
So hi, I haven't spoken about the Charlie Kirk murder until now because we didn't know anything. And since my channel was created not to report the news but to make sense of it, I felt like the only responsible thing to do was to wait until there was more information. It now appears that the person who shot and killed right-wing political commentator Charlie Kirk was like the majority of shooters in America, a young white male from a conservative pro-gun religious background.
Full stop. Who lived with a transgender biologically male partner who, there is evidence, was commenting in Antifa and leftist subreddits. There are transgender individuals that appear to have had foreknowledge making posts online, and coming from a background does not describe the individual. What she just did was a standard manipulation technique. Non-information to make you assume, we call this assumptive language or assumptive reasoning. That is to say, a man came from a religious background, and then you move on. But what if she actually explained the true facts of the individual? He came from a religious background and came to reject it, or that his background had nothing to do with it. There's more.
After being told for 2 straight days that the left had declared war on America, that the shooter was most likely trans, or in Congresswoman Nancy Mace's words, pro-tranny, after the Wall Street Journal published an article they had to later walk back that the bullets had a pro-trans message because it turned out to be just the markings of one of the world's biggest ammunition factories.
Full stop. That's a lie. An abject, overt lie. As we all know, one of the bullets said, "Hey, fascist, catch." They're saying, on the left, that this was a video game reference. Not that he actually shot Charlie Kirk, who was trans-critical and has been called a fascist. But by all means, I'll give him that one. Sure. It said, what did it have? Up, right, down, 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 which is a Helldivers 2 reference. Throw it away. Notice his bulge, OWO. Online meme referencing people online who are trans or furries messaging each other. It's not homophobic, pro, or anti-anything. It's a meme. Or how about one that said, if you read this, you are gay, LMAO. They're calling that homophobic. Nope, it's just childish humor. But the one I won't give them is Oh Bella Ciao. Ciao, ciao, ciao. That is an esoteric, overt Antifa song from Italy in World War II, currently being sung by people, Antifa leftists, mocking Charlie Kirk in New York. By all accounts, this guy was left aligned. My point is this. Tell me I'm wrong and disagree with me. But when you have individuals like this that will not be honest at the bare minimum and say, here are the facts that we think we know, but will outright lie. I can even show you the community notes. Tyler Robinson is officially registered as unaffiliated. Utah Governor Charlie Cox stated that he was indoctrinated by the left. The governor said that. While the shooter did come from a conservative background, the governor of Utah and the FBI have confirmed that leftist ideology was behind the murder. At least that is what is believed right now. Maybe it's wrong. That's fine. I don't think that he was a leftist, hardcore leftist, but gender ideology is a left-aligned ideology, and it's aligned with mainstream Democrat positions. This is not me saying this to condemn Democrats, but to point out, my friends, when liberals are dancing on the grave or lying about what happened to solidify their worldview, there is no reality in which we are sharing space. You will go out and say Charlie Kirk did not insult black women. He called black children a gift from God. In fact, he did. And they will put out fake quotes to justify his assassination. They have put out lists with my name on it. I condemn violence always. Never called for violence once. I think violence doesn't solve any problems. Yet here we are. The New York Times. Civil war mentions surge online. The term has increasingly been invoked on social media after major political moments. Take a look here. War is here, the far right responds. The left will share this article. The right probably won't. Many on the right are saying war is here, but they're not declaring it. This article mentions, I believe they mention Andrew Tate saying civil war. I've also said civil war before. What they do is they intentionally take that and say, you've called for civil war, instead of just pointing out where we're going. Because they want it. Then they accuse you of wanting it. Doesn't matter which side you're on. If you're a liberal, fine. Believe what you want to believe. But you know I'm right. All I'm saying is, when I tweet civil war because something happened, and I'm saying this is what's happening, they then write articles saying Tim Pool calls for a civil war. I have never called for a civil war. I think it's the biggest mistake we'll make in this country. I believe the left wants it because it'll destroy the Constitution. But what is true is the left will believe it. They'll say the right is causing it. Even Stephen Marsh called it toxic to pull down the flags to half-mast for Charlie Kirk. The LA Times. Professor Kevin Waite had just finished a seminar on the run-up to the American Civil War on Friday when a student cautiously raised her hand. Can I ask about the Charlie Kirk situation? The student, he said, wondered whether recent events carried any echoes of the past. Hyperbolic comparisons between modern political conflict and the horrific bloodshed of the past centuries have previously been the stuff of doomsday prepper threads on Reddit. But this week's shooting made it mainstream topic of conversation. While cautioning the country is nowhere near as fractured as it was when the Civil War erupted, Waite and other scholars of the period say they do increasingly see parallels. Our current political moment is really resonating with the 1850s. He and other scholars note similarities between the deployment of troops to American cities, widespread disillusionment with the Supreme Court, and spasms of political violence, especially from disaffected young men. What we call polarization, they call sectionalism. And I believe that's right. And in the 1850s, there was a growing sense that the sections of the country were pulling apart. Even before Kirk's alleged assassin was publicly identified as a 22-year-old who left anti-fascist messages, President Trump blamed the shooting on the radical left for political violence. Well, he was right, wasn't he? Conservative influencers amplified the rhetoric. With Trump ally Laura Loomer posting an X, more people will be murdered if the left isn't crushed with the power of the state. But it's a fact statement. Aaron Danielson was shot and killed in cold blood by Michael Reinhold in Portland, simply walking down the street. In Provo, Utah, a BLM rioter ran up to a car for no reason and shot the driver. We don't even know why. Trump supporters get routinely attacked and threatened, though times have changed a bit since the past 10 years. I've been swatted 15 times. The bomb squad has been to our studio numerous times. We've been forced to evacuate from credible threats. A man in a dress just last year showed up on our old property and physically attacked one of its residents. We don't even work there anymore. That's how insane this is. Now, I'm not saying the right's not violent or capable of it. I think that the sections of the right that are not part of Charlie Kirk's message. They're not at Turning Point USA. Mainstream Democrats, they fundraised for the BLM rioters who burned these cities down. They called it in defense of looting. We're not the same. They're going to say some aspects of modern politics are worryingly similar. What almost scares me more than the violence itself is the reaction to it. It was paranoia, the perception that this violence was unstoppable, that really sent the nation spiraling towards civil war in 1860 and 61. Top of the mind for Waite was paramilitary political movements known as the Wide Awakes. Hundreds of thousands of torch-toting, black-capped abolitionist youths who took to the streets out of frustration with their Republican reps. There was this perception that anti-slavery Republicans hadn't sufficiently been aggressive. Waite said. They believed that it was the slaveholders that were really pushing their agenda much more forcefully, much more violently, and anti-slavery politicians couldn't just sit down and take it anymore. Most Democratic politicians of the era were fighting to expand slavery to the Western territories. The Wide Awakes struck terror in their hearts. For their political opponents, it was really a scary spectacle. Anytime a cotton gin burned down in the South, they pointed to the Wide Awakes and other more radical anti-slavery Northerners. This is arson. The South was highly militarized. Every adult white man was part of a local militia. It was like a social club. So it was easy to take these local militias and turn them into anti-abolitionist defense units. Legal scholars have already noted striking similarities between Trump's use of the military to aid his mass deportation effort. The Trump administration has leaned on constitutional maneuvers used to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act, a divisive law that empowered state slave catchers from the South to make arrests in northern states. I argue it was the fugitive crisis more than the territorial crisis that drove the coming Civil War. The resistance in the North essentially made the fugitive slave law dead letter. Now, I have made the argument, one idea, is that a potential path in this country towards civil war is the immigration of ICE. The law enforcement, the enforcement of immigration laws. Sorry. If this is to follow a more social, liberal, left-aligned world, then you get Trump arresting illegal immigrants through National Guard or through ICE. The left rejects this and says, these are our neighbors and friends and they deserve rights. The left makes the argument that the right was seeking to restrict the human rights of undocumented citizens, which is a phrase they've used. Should the right lose the Civil War, illegal immigrants will be granted amnesty, the borders will be opened, and the argument will be no person is illegal, and humans, regardless of citizenship status, get human rights. That appears to be the liberal economic world order's agenda. This would create a one-world state where anyone is free to move in any direction. Not immediately, but with the end of slavery in the United States, which was nationwide and for hundreds of years and internationally how things were handled, certain people were not free to move about and do whatever they wanted. They were owned. With the defeat of the Democrats by the Republicans, the North over the South, and eventually the total abolition of slavery, no longer could a person be owned. The left is using similar logic right now. If you enter the border in violation of our laws, it is the law that is unjust. You are free to come. And should the right lose, they will amend the Constitution to say all humans are granted these rights and can vote and can freely move about the country. They will abolish the idea of citizenship, which is a massive goal of the liberal economic order. If the right wins, however, the far left fringe ideology will be dismantled. The United States will be protected, its borders restored, and this would be the end of the liberal economic order. I don't know what's going to happen or who's going to win. We don't know. One thing that I find truly fascinating is that strawberries in winter, in this Atlantic article, they're not citing me, which I actually was, I thought they were actually quoting. Maybe I'm just arrogant, I don't know. But I've been talking about this for a long time to the point where I get made fun of for it. And strawberries in winter is actually the point I've made over and over and over again. They're going to mention this woman, McCord. I believe it's a woman, right? Mary McCord. She suggested America's salvation would come from widespread attachment to the mundane. Americans don't like it when they can't get strawberries in winter, she went on. This idea of revolution, really, is that really what you want? It's no fun. It's literally the point I've made. I've mentioned what civil war might look like, and I'll go through it right now for you. Because when I turn on the news, I feel like we may be looking at it. But the one thing I've mentioned is that you're not going to have avocados anymore, and no more strawberries in winter. Strawberries in winter is a really great example of modern luxury. There are certain parts of this North and South America where they grow strawberries, and they ship them in refrigeration trucks to you in New York. So while you're surrounded by snow, there's strawberries. There's also greenhouses, but not really where they're making them. In a civil war, this would be a tremendous luxury, and it'd be too expensive for the average person. But I'm going to show you what civil war looks like. From the Post-Millennial. 2 men arrested after allegedly planting explosive device under Fox affiliate news vehicle in Magna, Utah. Fox 13 had a bomb allegedly planted under their vehicle. NBC News. Student shot after mistaken ID mishap. The institution in Maryland was placed on lockdown after a former student made threats online that appeared as though they were on campus. USA Today. Classes canceled, heightened security at multiple HBCUs after hoax threat calls. ABC News. U.S. college campuses experiencing epidemic of swatting calls following shooting death of Charlie Kirk. What will civil war look like? The mistake most people made is that they think it's in the movies. The mistake most of these experts make is that they're comparing a union of sovereign states to a country that has since solidified. You may be from Texas, but the Texan identity is long gone. I'm sorry, it is. Many people may disagree, but the reality is this. When you used to say you were from Texas, Texas was its own country for a while, and it meant something. Today, there are people from Texas that moved out a long time ago, and they're like, yeah, I'm from whatever. I don't consider myself an Illinoisan. Spent most of my life in Illinois, Chicago. I've lived in a bunch of places. Los Angeles, briefly was in Seattle and Denver and Hampton Roads, Virginia. Now West Virginia, was in Maryland, New Jersey, New York. Where am I really from? I'm from the United States. I'm American. What does a civil war look like? It will not be unions of states aligning with each other and then going and saying, hereby declare. No, that's a different time. Civil wars look like civil wars always have. What does it mean for you? You'll wake up one day and you will turn on the news, and every few minutes will be a report about violence. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Again, this is more of a civil strife era, which is when Bleeding Kansas, pre-Civil War, before you get full-scale warfare. But I woke up, I turned on Fox News, and every other story was about something like this. And now they tried blowing up a Fox truck. That's what it looks like. When things get heavy, when the United States, if it does come to a civil war, you will turn on the news, and Brett Baer will say, in Texas, I-95 suffered massive damage after an IED explosion. There were no injuries, though the road is going to be closed until further notice for repairs, obstructing trade. For those of you in New York, you may not be able to get those strawberries in time for Christmas. Moving on, we had a report out of California where the weather, that's what it's like. There will be reports of shootings. There will be a report of IEDs. There will be a report of explosions. And for most of you, it will be in some far-off land. There will be battlefronts. I don't know who will be fighting in them. But it's not going to be, for the most part, in the beginning, large trucks of California National Guard rolling into D.C. against U.S. National Guard like in the movie Civil War. That's silly. That's not what it would look like. Because anybody who looks at what's going on around the world right now or has ever had any kind of basic training in this stuff, I'll tell you. In Syria, there was a market, semi-residential. People walking down the street with grocery bags. 2 men with rifles looking through the window of a building started shooting people. There were no tanks. There were no soldiers pulling up in APCs. The 2 guys came in undetected into government territory, into Assad-controlled territory, and said they were going to start killing collaborators and government agents. And that was it. It means that one day you'll be walking down the street and you'll hear an explosion and you'll duck and you don't know where it is and you'll run home. It means one day you'll be walking home, you'll hear gunshots and you won't know where it comes from and you'll run home. It's a big country. Civil war doesn't look like the movies. People don't get it. One day you'll be at home and you'll hear some gunshots while you sleep. You'll peek out the window, careful not to get too close, and you'll see men, 3 or 4 with armor and guns, running through the streets. And they'll be gone. And you won't know why or what happened. And you will just get your family together, hide in the basement, lock your doors. Eventually, one day you'll wake up and there'll be a man on TV who says the war is over. We've won. And then they'll say, it's time for everyone on other faction to surrender and give up and lay down your arms. The fighting has stopped. And then you'll get reconstruction. If your side loses or wins, it doesn't even matter. There will be a period of military dictatorship. That's what history tells us. Now, I don't know if that's what's going to happen. But I can tell you when I go online and they are lying intentionally and they believe the lies, all that really matters is they're saying, this is the world that I live in and it is different from yours. And that could be left or right. So Stephen Morse sees something I see. There's a bifurcation with no healing. Neither side wants. I mean, I would argue that Charlie Kirk was the off-ramp who was saying debate, but the right was winning. The left wasn't going to tolerate it. The truth, if the right lost, they wouldn't tolerate it either. So this felt like an inevitability, which is why I have often said I fear civil war. I predicted January 6th, imperfectly. In September of 2020, I said in November, when Trump loses, they're going to go to D.C. and storm the White House. November came and went, Trump lost, and people called me a lunatic. Then January 6th happened, and the left said Tim Pool had foreknowledge. This proves it. Maybe I was just right. And I don't want to be. And I've said every step of the way, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the death of Charlie Kirk will wake people up. They'll say, enough. I wish. And I say it every time because I don't know that I know everything. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just reading the news and saying, what comes next? 1 + 1 = 2. When mainstream liberals cheer for an assassination, the logic is simple. More people will be emboldened. Luigi Mangione was made into a saint. I mean, literally, they made a candle with him as a saint and are selling it. Why was Charlie Kirk killed? A variety of reasons. But I would guarantee you this. The shooter saw the lionization of a murderer and said, worst case scenario is at least one side looks at you like a hero. And they do. They cheer for it. I guess we'll see. But I hope not. All I can tell you is I hope you're prepared. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I live in the middle of nowhere on a large property with security perimeter and armed guards because people literally want to kill me for what I say. Because what I say is dangerous. Charlie Kirk was more dangerous. He's the reason Trump won. All these young men who shifted rightward at colleges and high schools. Charlie knew what he was doing, and he was right. The left wouldn't let that stand. I agree. If the left was winning, the right wouldn't let it stand either. Where do you think we go next? I think you know. That's why you clicked this video. Stay tuned for more. Smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Stay tuned. More to come. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all in the next segment.